$242 billion. That's how much money is flooding into Australian infrastructure over the next 5 years. And here's what most people don't realize. This money isn't being spread evenly across the country. It's being concentrated into specific corridors, specific suburbs, and specific regions. And when billions of dollars flow into a region, property markets transform. So stay tuned because I'm going to show you exactly where this money is heading and what it means for the suburbs in those areas. And later in this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 infrastructure corridors that are receiving massive investment right now. And I'm going to show you the specific suburbs within those corridors that are already starting to change. We're going to look at what's actually happening on the ground in Western Sydney, Southeast Queensland, and Perth. And by the end, you'll understand how infrastructure investment works, why certain suburbs are positioned for growth, and what's actually being built in your region. So welcome back to the channel. My name's Aaron, and today we're talking about something that's transforming Australian suburbs right now, but most people don't even know it's happening. $242 billion. That's the size of Australia's major public infrastructure pipeline over the next 5 years. And to put that into perspective, that's approximately 40% of Australia's entire annual GDP. It's the largest infrastructure commitment in Australian history. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a big number, but what does it actually mean for me? What does it mean for suburbs? What does it mean for property values? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. See, infrastructure investment doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's planned years in advance, and it's announced through government budgets. It's detailed in public reports. And if you understand what's being built and where, you can actually see which suburbs are about to change before it happens. That's the real story here. So over the next 5 years, this $242 billion is being directed into specific areas across Australia. We're talking about new train lines, upgraded roads, new hospitals, new schools, new power infrastructure, housing developments. All of this concentrated in particular corridors. And when infrastructure gets built in a suburb, that suburb changes. Employment increases and connectivity improves. Livability also increases, which increases rental demand, and property values soon follow. This has all been documented very consistently across Australia. When Sydney built the North West Metro line, property values along that corridor started climbing years before that trains were even ran. When Brisbane announced the Cross River Rail project, suburbs along that route began transforming. This isn't speculation, this is what actually happens. Now, the interesting thing is that this infrastructure money is being concentrated. It's not spread evenly across every suburb in every city. It's focused into specific corridors, specific regions, and specific projects. And the suburbs that are getting this investment, they're positioned for significant change over the next 5 to 10 years. That's what we're going to break down and why today. So let me start by explaining what this infrastructure pipeline actually is and where this money is coming from. The major public infrastructure pipeline tracks all government-committed infrastructure projects across Australia. It's compiled by Infrastructure Australia, which is an independent agency that monitors government spending on major projects. Now, this includes projects from all levels of government, federal, state, and local. And it covers basically every category of infrastructure you can think of: transport, buildings, utilities, water, everything. The reason this matters is that when Infrastructure Australia updates this pipeline, which happens annually, it gives us a clear picture of where government priorities are. And government priorities determine where development happens. So let me break down where this money is actually going. Transport infrastructure accounts for $129 billion. That's 53% of the total pipeline. This includes rail lines, motorways, upgrades, airport expansions, and public transport improvements. Buildings infrastructure accounts for $27 billion. That's about 32%. Within that, you've got social housing projects worth $28 billion, hospital projects worth $22 billion, and schools and community facilities on top of that. Utilities infrastructure is $36 billion. That's predominantly electricity transmission and distribution, water infrastructure, and increasingly, renewable energy projects. Now, what's interesting is that this pipeline has been growing. Last year, it was $228 billion. This year is $242 billion. That's $14 billion of new commitments in just 12 months. But more importantly, This composition is shifting. Energy infrastructure has more than doubled year on year. It's the fastest growing category in the pipeline. So why does this matter? Because energy projects are happening in regional Australia, not just capital cities. And that's creating property demand in areas that haven't seen significant investment in years. The other thing worth understanding is that there's actually a labour shortage to deliver these projects. Infrastructure Australia latest report highlights that the industry is short of 141,000 workers to deliver this pipeline. I want you to think about that. 141,000 workers. That's a massive shortage. And when you're short of workers, you've got major projects to deliver. Workers from other parts of the country migrate to where the work is. And when workers migrate, they all need housing. They need rentals. They need to live somewhere. This creates demand pressure in suburbs where projects are happening. So let me walk you through what's actually happening in one region right now, and that's Western Sydney. This is the clearest example of how infrastructure investment transforms a region. Western Sydney is receiving the largest concentration of infrastructure investment in the country at the moment. We're talking about multiple converging mega projects all happening at the same time. First, there's the Western Sydney International Airport at Badgerys Creek. This is a new full-scale international airport opening in 2026. It's a multi-billion-dollar project that will eventually handle 15 million passengers a year. An international airport doesn't just employ pilots and flight attendants, it requires construction workers during development, then permanent staff plus supply chain workers, retail staff, hospitality workers, and ground crews. The airport alone will eventually employ over 20,000 people directly, with potentially 40,000 indirect jobs in the surrounding economy. But the airport is just the beginning. Around the airport, there's the Western Sydney Aerotropolis. This is a massive precinct of office space, retail, logistics facilities, and residential housing. It's planned to become a major employment hub outside of the CBD. So think about what that actually means. You're creating an entirely new economic centre with tens of thousands of jobs outside of the existing CBD. Workers need to live near their jobs, so residential demand in suburbs around the Aerotropolis will increase significantly. On top of that, there's Sydney's Metro West. This new underground railway line running from Westmead in Western Sydney all the way through to the CBD. When the line opens, commute times for Western Sydney residents will drop dramatically. Suburbs along the Metro line suddenly becomes much more desirable addresses. The M12 motorway is also being upgraded. This connects the airport to the motorway network, improving road access to Western Sydney. So you've got an airport, a new employment precinct, a new railway line, and road upgrades all happening in the same region over a similar time frame. What's the market response been? Well, suburbs along the metro corridor have seen significant growth. Liverpool have grown 13% in the last 12 months. St Mary's is up 7.3%. Fairfield is up 7.4%. And Oran Park is one of the newer developments and has seen really strong rental demand. Now, these aren't astronomical growth rates month to month, but they're consistent and they're sustained. And they're happening because of the infrastructure being built. The thing to understand is that this growth is still in the early stages. The airport opens in 2026. The metro is progressively opening from 2024, 2025, and onwards. The Aerotropolis is being developed right now. By the time all of this infrastructure is complete and operational, by the time all of the jobs are actually in place and workers are living in those suburbs, the market transformation will be much more pronounced. This is what infrastructure investment actually looks like on the ground. It's not just one project, it's multiple converging projects that transform entire regions. Let me show you another example. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. Brisbane and the Olympic Games infrastructure investment. Brisbane is hosting the 2032 Olympic Games, and because of that, there's an enormous amount of infrastructure being built in preparation. The Cross River Rail is a $17 billion project. It's a new underground railway line running through the Brisbane CBD with 6 new train stations. This is fundamentally changing how people access the city centre. Suburbs along the Cross River Rail corridor, like Woolloongabba, Roma Street, Bogo Road, are being directly transformed. New train stations mean easier access to employment, easier access to city centres, easier commutes. Around the stadium precincts and Olympic venues, there is significant development happening. The Brisbane River precinct is being upgraded. Southbank is being expanded. The Gabba is being redeveloped as an Olympic venue. All of this requires construction workers during the build phase. Then it creates ongoing employment once the facilities are operational. But here's what's interesting. The Olympic infrastructure isn't just in Brisbane, it's spreading to surrounding regions. The Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast are getting significant investment for shooting events and other Olympic activities. And that's where the property market gets really, really interesting. Infrastructure in Australia's data shows that construction demand in the Sunshine Coast and Wide Bay region over the next 4 years will be more than 4 times what it was in the previous 4 years. More than 4 times. Now, the Sunshine Coast has been growing for years. It's a popular destination, but 4 times the construction demand is not normal growth. That's a boom. That's infrastructure-driven development. Suburbs in the growth corridors from Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast are seeing investor interest for that reason. The suburbs where infrastructure investment is concentrating, which creates demand. The Olympic projects are temporary in some ways. The Games only happen in 2032, but the infrastructure is permanent. The trains will run for decades, the stadiums will be used for decades, the improved connectivity will benefit residents and workers for decades. That's why these infrastructure investments create lasting property value growth. Now, let me show you what's happening on the other side of the country, Perth's MetroNet expansion. Perth has been building a new train lines and upgrading the rail network. The MetroNet project includes 4 new or extended rail lines serving different parts of the metropolitan area. The Yanchep line runs north of the city, the Byford line runs south and southeast, the Thornley-Cockburn line runs through the eastern suburbs, and the Ellenbrook line runs to the northeast. Now, Perth suburbs in these corridors have been traditionally either inner city addresses or outer suburbs. But these new train lines are changing that. Suburbs like Ellenbrook, which was considered too far out 5 or 10 years ago, suddenly becomes commutable. You can get from Ellenbrook to the city in about 45 minutes by train. That changes the suburbs' appeal. Suddenly, people who can't afford inner suburbs but don't want to be completely isolated can consider Ellenbrook. Property prices reflect that. You can buy a house and land package in Ellenbrook for $560,000 to $600,000. Rental yields are about 5%. It's a productive investment because of the connectivity improvement. The Northern Corridor, Yanchep, Alkimos, Two Rocks are similar. These are areas that were quite remote. The new train connection makes them accessible. Developers are building new estates. There's residential growth happening right now. The thing about Perth is that it's more affordable than the East Coast. You can buy quality property in growth corridors for well under $700,000. The rental yields are strong and the growth is being driven by infrastructure improvements. For investors looking outside the East Coast capitals, Perth's infrastructure-driven growth corridors offer genuine opportunity. The pattern is the same across all these examples. Infrastructure gets built, connectivity improves, employment increases, and property values follow. Now, I want to talk about something that's a little less obvious, but incredibly significant, and that's the energy transition, because this is creating entirely new infrastructure-driven property hotspots, and most people aren't paying attention to it. Utilities infrastructure, predominantly energy projects, has more than doubled in the pipeline. It's now $36 billion over the next 5 years, but that's just the government-tracked public infrastructure. When you add private sector renewable energy investment, wind farms, solar farms, battery storage facilities, hydrogen projects, the total estimate is more closer to $163 billion over the next 5 to 10 years. $163 billion. Now, where's this happening? Predominantly regional Australia. In New South Wales, there are major renewable energy projects being developed around the central west. In Queensland, it's in the Wide Bay and surrounding regions. In Victoria, it's in the west. These aren't small projects. A large-scale solar farm can require hundreds of construction workers for several years. Wind farms require ongoing maintenance and operation. When you're building these regional towns, you're creating employment demand in areas that might not have significant employment growth for years. So Infrastructure Australia's data identifies 10 regions that are seeing public investment increases over 200% or more compared to the previous 4 years. These are predominantly regions where energy transition projects are concentrated. 200%. That's tripling investment. What happens when you triple investment in a regional town? Well, you create a labor boom. Workers migrate to the area. They need housing. Rental demand spikes. Property becomes scarce and prices increase. Now, buying property in regional areas require really careful due diligence. You need to understand the local economy, the sustainability of the demand, and the actual job creation. But these energy transition corridors are creating genuine property demand in places like the central west of New South Wales and the Wide Bay in Queensland. Most property investors ignore regional areas completely. They focus on capital cities. But regional infrastructure investment, especially energy projects, is creating opportunities that are worth understanding. So if you're wondering what infrastructure is coming to your area and how you actually find that information, the best place to start is Infrastructure Australia's website. They publish the major public infrastructure pipeline annually. It's a public document. You can search for projects in your state or your local area. Each state government also publishes their own infrastructure plans. Queensland has its planning for prosperity. New South Wales has its future transport plan. Western Australia has its Transport Act 3. These documents outline what's being built and when. Local councils also have their own planning documents. They publish strategic plans that detail planned developments and infrastructure in their areas. So when you search for these resources, what you want to look for is number one, transport infrastructure. New train lines, motorway upgrades, bus rapid transit corridors. When transport is upgraded, accessibility improves and property values follow. 2, employment infrastructure. So new hospitals, universities, government facilities, major office developments. Employment nodes create demand for housing nearby. 3, housing developments. Government-sponsored affordable housing projects, community housing projects. When housing is being built, the infrastructure generally also follows. And 4, utility infrastructure. Power stations, transmission lines, water treatment facilities. These are ongoing projects that create employment. When you understand what is being built in your area, you can make more informed decisions. You can understand which suburbs are positioned for change, and you can understand the timing of when that change might happen. That's something most investors never do. Most investors just look at current prices and current growth and assume that trend will continue. But if you actually understand the infrastructure pipeline, you can see where the growth is likely to accelerate. So today we've covered what the infrastructure pipeline actually is. We've looked at 3 major regions, Western Sydney, Brisbane, and Perth, to see how infrastructure is being used right now. We've talked about the emerging energy transition opportunities, and we've discussed how you can actually find this information for your own area. Now, if this has helped you understand infrastructure investment differently, I'd love to hear about it. So first, hit the like button. When you do, this tells the algorithm that this is the kind of educational content that's valuable. Second, I want you to drop a comment. Tell me, what infrastructure projects are happening in your area? What suburbs are you watching? Or if you're not sure, tell me your city and I might point you to what's coming. I'll read every comment and your insight might actually shape our next video. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe now. We break down Australian property markets weekly, the actual data and actual trends and actual opportunities. Now, understanding what infrastructure is being built is one thing. Actually figuring out which suburb within that infrastructure corridor are worth investing is another layer, because you need to look at current property prices. You need to understand rental yields. You need to check vacancy rates. You need to evaluate whether the market has already priced in the infrastructure benefit. And you need to look at the timing. Is this infrastructure opening in 1 or 5 years? Because that affects when property values might accelerate. This is detailed analysis, and getting it wrong can mean buying in a suburb that's already peaked or missing a genuine opportunity because you didn't realize what was coming. That's the kind of analysis we do with investors. We look at infrastructure projects, we identify suburbs entering acceleration phase, and we help build portfolios positioned for infrastructure-driven growth. So if you're serious about understanding the opportunities in your market, book a call with our team today. The link is in the description, and we'll actually walk you through what's actually being built in your area and which suburbs are positioned for growth. Hopefully you learned something really valuable today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.